Like, Papa is just, it's just crazy, but it's like, if I had to do it all over again, I would pick him.
My dad's childhood, his parents were really, really strict. It's especially his mom.
The older people that knows my mom are divided into two groups. Either they hate my mom or they like my mom.
So Papa tells stories about, how strict his parents were, especially his mom. I get, but maybe she had to be, because to keep all those boys in line. I mean, from what I hear from everybody, they were ulawale.
There's a reputation about us Sumatea boys. They don't back down.
The way we were basically brought up is if one gets into a fight, you will have to fight the whole Lokeni brothers.
I know my dad pretty much was the one that they looked up to.
Big brother that's very protective. He's one of those that will do anything to make sure that we're safe.
I've always looked up to him as he's the oldest brother, mainly because he's good at everything. And for me, as a younger brother, I wanted to be like that.
Growing up, he was just a natural athlete.
In softball, Loi was a pitcher, I'm a catcher. So being a catcher for Loi and a pitcher, I basically hang out with him a lot.
Papa loved his parents. He learned a lot of good things from them.
My memories of my grandfather is he was kind. He was kind of like my dad was.
I think maybe he took more after his dad.
Lokeni, he was humble and he was quiet.
That's how my grandpa was. He was very strict, but you could tell that he still loved us.
Our dad was basically a peacemaker. I know he left his family when he was young just to follow the missionaries. So he's a very humble man. But then make no mistake, don't question his decisions. Otherwise, he'll just have to suffer the consequences.
Lokeni is my great-grandfather, and here's what he wrote about my papa's birth. The oldest boy was Anaoleloi. He was named after the building site of the high chief whose name was Se'ui. Loi was born in Mapusangafo on January 16, 1945.
He just wanted to be like him with church because my grandfather was really strong in the church.
So the story that I remember, I can't remember if it was a taxi driver or bus driver.
It's about my grandfather, why he was sent to jail.
And again, reading from Lokeni's journal. We saved money to send our kids to school and to take care of Sao and her family and her parents. This was done by fishing and working for Sao's father, who was the chief of the family. This carried on when Sao's dad was sent to jail when he told the people from the village to kill a man.
Prior to this, there was a lot of people of the village that been hit by cars, like hit and run, and they're found on the side of the road.
What happened was that there was a bus driver from one of the village.
Hit and killed a little girl from the village.
And so our grandpa, when he heard of the news, he told the Kaulea to go catch him and killed him.
Beat him till he's dead, pretty much.
I don't know if he told them specifically to kill him, but that's what ended up happening.
And so when they came back, our grandpa asked them, "Is he dead?" They said yes. And so he told them to go back and cut up his body and throw him in the ocean. When the guys came back to get their whatever nice axes or whatever they need to, my dad was there. He stopped one of the cars. He got in front of it and told him to take his body to the hospital. Our dad basically saved him from, I mean, he's dead, but had a burial before he was chopped up.
Growing up, there were two nicknames that were given to Se'ui, Papa's grandfather. Sorry, it was only one nickname. So it was Se'ui Malkafi, which is Se'ui with a razor.
They said back in the days he was pretty hardcore.
So when that happened, because I think the cops maybe were coming to look for him, he climbed a coconut tree with the razor, like I guess he was going to commit suicide or saying he was going to. So that's why that name stuck Seui Murakafi.
So there's two stories. I don't know which one, I would have to ask. But the first one goes that the police showed up to arrest him and he was shaving. And so he told them, you'll have to wait until I'm done. The other story I heard later is no, they came to arrest him and he threatened them with his coffee.
And he ended up going to jail because he was the one that told the guys to go.
I think why they left Nauli really was my grandfather did not want to be around the Seui family.
Because my parents were members of the church, and he hated the church.
I remember I was 9 years old when we moved away.
Just so that their kids can grow up more strong in the faith and not be mixed up with all that trouble they're getting into in Uli.
These were some of the hardest days in my life, where I was taking care of my family and trying to take care of Sal's family so that my family could receive the blessings for a better life and for their future, because I didn't want my family and my kids to grow up the way I came.
So my grandmother, my dad's mom, didn't want my dad and his siblings growing up around that environment. She took them away from Nauli and moved to Mestepa.
He told me about the story of when he stepped on a ghost tooth.
In Mlaimi, right across the street from the ASCC, the community college, there's like what Samoa would call a kia.
It was when he was younger, and I think it was at night, and he was running through the graveyard, and he stepped on something, and it messed up his foot, but they couldn't find anything in there.
So he was riding his bike down that, coming down the hill, and he fell in front of that, in front of the kia. And then what happened was he started suffering from knee pain. Couldn't figure it out, but his knees were pretty bad that they finally took him to see a fufu.
And they had to like beat it out of his foot, and then after that, it was better. So he said it was a ghost tooth.
Ended up being, there was a nifo. And it was from that kia, which is, they extracted that from his knee.
Maybe he told me a different story because I was like a kid, but...
Who's the best looking out of my dad and his brothers? That would definitely be my dad.
My dad is the best looking one out of, and I'm not being biased, man. It's just the truth. Oh, as far as the good looks, come on, man. Look, it's beauty right here.
My kids would say the same thing about me. You know what I mean?
It was always Uncle Fale that claimed he was better looking than my dad. But please, we know my dad was better looking.
One thing I could say is he's never short of women.
Because all the brothers joke, like that's how they joke. They always say, oh, and I'm the best looking one. Every time they get up, and I'm the best looking one. But even Uncle Silsil will admit.
The best looking brother, from my perspective, would be Ele.
Papa said Ele was the smartest of all of them. Like if he had lived, he would have just surpassed all of them because he was just naturally bright.
He got a scholarship, and he was one of the first people that were sent from American Samoa that, to us, a scholarship, to the mainland.
When he passed away, we don't talk about him. It's very difficult for us even now. He was like my mom's Billy. And he was also very smart.
He had gone on a scholarship to, I think, Missouri, entering the draft for the military.
We were on our way to Nauli. We were living in Mesepa. As we were going, a bird landed on my mom's shoulder. Mom's intuition, or she cried. She said, I remember, she said, something happened to my son. About a week later.
I remember like it was a Sunday that we finished our kongai. And then when these three guys came.
From our house, we saw officers that were the notification team.
Gave my mom, that bad news. Loi was a very good boxer.
Well, I knew he boxed, but I didn't know he was really good at boxing.
Your boxing, he
was the top lightweight boxer of American Samoa. He fought a couple of top boxers from Western Samoa, in Western Samoa. Now, it might not sound a big deal now, but back then, any competition between islands that you are involved with, it's a big deal.
And I've experienced it because we did have some boxing gloves, and he would make me put them on, and we would spar. And I don't like it because his hands were too fast. I was always getting hit in the face.
After Papa graduated from Mapsanga High School, he got accepted into BYU Hawaii.
He was able to get a scholarship to come to BYU Hawaii.
And then the night before his flight to Hawaii, he went out with some friends, and he tells a story where he comes home and his mom was mad.
He did something to make her mad. It was something really small, something you wouldn't really get mad about.
I think he went to a dance the night before he was supposed to leave or something.
I think he may have had a girlfriend or something, and his mom found out, and she ripped up his scholarships.
But instead of her thinking about like his future, what would benefit him, she ripped up his papers and he ended up not going to BYU.
That was it. He didn't try to find another way to leave. That was just it. He didn't ever party. He didn't drink. He didn't smoke. Knowing Papa, he was probably with a girl. He could have been boxing, or he could have been with a... Because that's what he did for fun. You know what I mean? Like those unsanctioned fights, like out in the boonies somewhere, or out in the boonies somewhere with a girl.
Growing up, he would always say, these lips, cigarette, never touch these lips. Alcohol, never pass these lips. So no, he wasn't a partier in that sense, but I think he was just always out. He's active.
I got a few stories of his motorcycle.
As soon as my mom heard the motorcycle, she'd run out and watch him go by.
Yes, that's how my mom got attracted to him, was him riding his motorcycle.
I mean, the story with how he saw my mom the first time, how he met her, how he approached her, he was on a motorcycle.
Ke bilang alay faya ongay Manuel Tausala. Ulay fay nga duwe nga fado duwala liyo Prince Philip. On bilang ako ama masangi mayay.
And so he said he saw her, and that's why he kept coming back to the store.
Ola sula nga maway lo ma-epi. May lord falas kulimi nga ay media masabat bali may ede yun makufali. Ay sa ulo na wilafi. Uloy lang fay lang wilafi.
And the whole time my mom's cousin is not having any of it.
Famay epi. Awang ekaw kalat kama dia. Ilo epi na nga nga ongay la wali lang chile faya ongay loy.
Because Samoa was a small island, and like she knew his reputation, she was like telling my mom, like, no.
My mom was always warned by countless people. I guess, she got that warning when she was young and didn't listen.
Papa had a reputation of being a ladies' man, even at a young age.
He was really popular amongst the girls. Even women that I know now that are my friends' moms tell me, which is gross.
Kuba ode wila. Wa, ngalo fia. Koso bab sa badia makora koso ode wila. Ya ai fa mai no orang kala. Ikevia. Wa ko me fa ngangi. Fa e fa mako inga ve ngangi. Fa be ke sa la ka ko ive. Olo la ele por siva. Ar siva nga la ulok mamo ah. Wa elok me kisi fo la.
He had told them, oh, like our church is having a dance, you should come to the dance. So my mom asked her dad, Grandpa Pua, if she could go to this Mormon dance. And first he was like, no, but then he finally gave in. And so Grandpa Pua dropped my mom and her girl cousin off at the dance. She was dancing with Whangatoele.
Ya masiva dia ba ele. O fa kulo ya ele. A fellow muso fo Anaoleloi. Life fusu. Le ubiro fa alongo kulo mai lo wilafi. Sa uloloi fa mai ya ele. Mai lo panga se masiva. Ya masiva ilo la yecho.
And Papa walked up and just said, I'm going to dance with her.
Ya nga mama sang me fa mai dia. Fi fai wo ya oi. Fai ma wo.
And then, they just start dating. Papa's parents never liked my mom because she was not a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
My parents, basically, number one, they have other things that they wanted Lloyd to do. Dating two at a time, I think they felt that kind of got him off course.
And then because Grandpa Pua too, this is his daughter, it's not like they weren't really accepting of dating, right? But she said Papa was persistent.
My grandfather, her dad, did not like him at all. So he was always trying to make my mom break up with him.
When they were dating, he used to come and pick her up on his motorcycle.
She would hear him before she saw him. You know, they would all hear him, his motorcycle. And she said, and then my mom says my grandfather would just start like, oh my gosh, he's here again, you know?
The motorcycle coming down, he was like, why is he always coming over here? Why?
Mom said like she would tell Papa like, you have to stop coming here. My dad doesn't like, you know, you coming here all the time, you know, but he said, but I want to see you.
He disappeared quite a bit with his motorcycle with two on.
Saudi Arabia, mga ola, fai pui po maua i lo ia whakara o kama, ia whakari se o se aso, ia koe oro le se aso ko ngai, nga fue o lo kama.
So one time she got beat up really, really bad with the panga'auf, with the hose by her father, and it marked up her whole body. And I guess my dad said that he took my grandfather to go talk to my mom's dad, and he wouldn't even accept my dad's dad to come speak with him.
Nangau soma, asola kiki soma a, e kaunga pa ai au soma. Faku so loi never ai or kama, never ai or kama. Ala ke fa pe. E ke o mai lo fa fu lo kama. Ya, la ku lo io loi, la ke kani mai. Ora vo e kani. Fa ku fu lo kama ka lo so mai loi, ko sa lo kama ko fu e. E o lo ngani, e po la sa lo ka so la I lo ke ka o kala lo boega. Fu o ku lo kama. Wa sao wa ya kangolo ka mafa pere wa ma ya o ma sa lo po o le fiaru la wo ko le ma wo ma lo ka ma e sa ngi fai po ai ma wa ai go lui fai po ma o lo ma bo ma e fa ko lo ka ma ya lui vai oi e le fai po se kenye se lo ko se kama e fai po lo ko kenye alura so ko lo ma bo ma.
She went to Hawaii where my dad was at, and they were still trying to keep them apart, but according to my mom, my dad found out that she was in Hawaii and then they met up somewhere. So I think that they ended up getting married in Hawaii.
So after Papa and Grandma got married, they were eventually sealed in New Zealand. And here's what my great-grandpa wrote about that day. In New Zealand, we sealed the kids and married Anaoleloi and Tu'ua and two of their kids, Nive, Ali'itasi, and Sally.
For my mom's childhood, we hear a lot more stories from her than from my dad's childhood.
So my mom, Mutiatai, was born in Fastouta, Samoa, Apia.
But they moved to American Samoa when she was only 3. She just loves to always say that. Oh, I came over. I'm not from Western Samoa, whatever. So she came over to American Samoa when she was 3.
They lived in Tafuna by the airport before there was an airport there. So she remembers the stories of them bombing, you know, the place to break up the rocks and everything.
Well, I think my mom was a spoiled one because she's the eldest.
What she says is she had a good childhood. Her and her mom were really close. And growing up, I saw that her and my grandma were really close.
We were raised in Tafuna with my grandparents. It was a 2-bedroom house.
My parents had their own room with AC, but we all just slept with our grandmother.
Right when she picks a spot to lay down, we'd all run to see who can sleep next to her.
And so we'd all sit there with our pillows and we'd say, Grandma, where are you going to sleep? But in Samoan, it's and she says, Kimoyo maka. I sleep with my eyes. Because she knows as soon as she lays down, we're all going to attack her. And then the poor woman, because she gets so hot, because now we're blocking like any kind of breeze from the fan.
She would get so annoyed because she would get hot. Someone's hot.
So then she waits until we all fall asleep, and then she gets up and moves.
Like she's sneaking off and lay down, and not even 5 minutes in, we're all next to her again. And she'd always say, and someone, I can't get any sleep. I can't get any sleep. But we didn't care because we just wanted to be next to her.
He worked hard to provide for his family, and it wasn't always enough a lot of the times. So that's where my grandparents stepped in.
I mean, I knew we didn't have everything that other kids would have. We're in Samoa. It didn't really matter if we don't have the newest things.
I think he joined the military to try to get more money for his family.
Our dad was always gone a lot. But when he would come home, we'd rush to him because, you know, he always brought MREs home.
One, because my mom tells the story of when my dad went to the military, she was pregnant with me, had complications when I was born, didn't know if I was going to make it or not. So she was trying hard to get me from Samoa to Hawaii so he could meet me, before anything happens.
I mean, even though he was gone a lot from home, he was always there whenever we needed him.
He was stationed in Virginia somewhere, and my mom got on a Greyhound bus with Tumua, who was a baby at that time, to go see him.
Ia o ko le ma Greyhound. Masui lai lua Pennsylvania le pasi. Oka ile se kupe tio. E pinga sifuru lima kala o cash. Au lui lawa li foi o le pas. Tipo ngai e ka mu o ko le pasi le sa mai ale. Oka ile se ma utu bo ko le pasi. Ava le fefe o roi. Pe o ka fefe o le lua ko ma. E wa bisi kia o le pasi po se serve a ngai ma wa. And
of course, there is no way, like to text or like, oh, where are you? Nothing. So there was absolutely no communication. And remember, my mom's English was very limited too.
So she gets there. She doesn't speak very much English, but luckily, it was late at night, I believe. Luckily, a man, the taxi driver, saw her and he came over and he was asking her, "Did you need help?"
And my mom says she just got there with Tumwa and just said my dad's name, and then they tried calling my dad.
Luckily, one of the guards at the gate, when she said the name, knew him, and then he came and he saw her there.
My earliest memory is of Papa as a police officer. I don't know him as anything else.
Do you know Lloyd, the policeman? Well, a lot of people, especially those that come from Nuuli, know who he is.
Yeah, pretty much. I think everybody that was on the island back then when he was a cop, they know who he was.
Ke ro kala senga ngo ko mafkau ngai da we ro wo kiloi o le leo nga e fa mahongi lang nga wenga.
We went to Tafuna High School, and that's a lot of Nuuli kids had to go to that school. The Nuuli kids were really bad. Like, they would beat other kids up, whatever. The principal would call my dad to come to discipline them because he was the only one they were scared of.
I just know that Papa got a lot of calls for backup even when he wasn't working, because they just knew that if Papa showed up, then the people would behave.
Because my dad didn't give a damn who you were going to get it, like everybody else.
I mean, were they fearful of him because he was a police officer, or were they fearful of him because he was crazy? One of his responsibilities as a police officer was to go around to the high schools to teach, about, drugs, anti-drugs and stuff like that.
We had a assembly at our school, and, they were invited to talk about drugs and stuff. It makes you dumb. You is ugly, blah, blah, blah. Then he gets to G and he goes, and G is for crazy. I was like, oh, no.
So that's why we always say, oh yeah, they're not crazy, they're crazy.
And we told him, dude, what the heck is wrong with you? G is for crazy? He goes, oh, it was just a joke. I'm like, no, it wasn't a joke. You came out for real with that one.
The reason why I think he knew what he was saying. He said it on purpose because he went to other schools and said the same thing. Because my friends from other schools would be like, oh my God, your dad came. And then he his little spiel, and then he gets to G and he says G stands for Gracie. I was like, I'm never gonna live this down.
Papa always spoke about himself in the third person.
What did Papa told you? Oh my God.
That was his famous saying all the time. What did Papa told you?
Papa, it's what did Papa tell you?
No, you're saying it wrong.
He said no, it's a past participle. I have no idea what that means or who taught him that, and he stuck with it. Till the day he died, that's how he spoke. What did Papa told you?
He always took us fishing even though we annoyed him.
Well, he tried to get me to go fishing. I did not like fishing because it took away from me being with my friends, But my dad did like fishing though. If he could fish every day, he would.
But I was there a lot when he was fishing, but we're just swimming.
We would walk in the water and throw our fishing line. Sometimes the fish be coming to us fast and we're like screaming. That's what irritated him.
I think fishing was his time, to kind of just be by himself. It was relaxing for him.
So Papa had a kili, a fishing net. He would spend hours repairing that kili. It was huge. He would always catch lots of fish. He would walk through the village, and
All the fish that he would catch would be just given away.
if he saw like one of the elderly people like sitting in their fale Samoa, then he would give them some on his way home. It's a Samoan fale, no walls, just poles and a thatched roof where you can just see everything. And he would walk through the village, people call out and say hi.
And then the Fautasi race, I just remember he was like old and still participating. Like he was really, really strong. Like he was just a natural born leader in charge of everything he was a part of.
As far as I can remember, he was always a chorister.
He was a chorister, but I don't know about his voice though.
He has a bad voice. But he loved music. He could play a little bit of piano, but he loved leading the choir. We didn't like him leading the choir because that means we have to be at every choir practice.
And we used to sit through all those song practices.
Sally and I do not have good singing voices, but to him, he just would, because my daughters, they can sing. And we're like, no, we can't.
He was even competitive at being a chorister as he was in everything he did. Like he would listen to, other choirs, and he would make his comments or the chorister, like how she conducts, he would have something to say about that. I always think about Papa when it comes to the church, how he loved the gospel so much. And even though he didn't live his life according to gospel teachings, gospel standards.
Yeah, apparently my dad was in Hawaii a lot. And then one of Mom's cousins called her and told her that she saw my dad at the airport with a lady. And so the cousin helped my mom pay her fare to come to Hawaii so she can catch my dad in the act. And that's what she did.
Because there was a time where maybe that was the longest that they had been apart, that my mom actually started dating another police officer. But Nive, that's one of her recurring nightmares, is her waking up and looking for my dad.
I had this nightmare that my mom would take me to my Aunt Olina's house, and then she'd leave with a man, and I would just cry, and she'd be laughing in the car saying, and I thought it was just a nightmare, and my aunt said, no, that really happened. So she's the one that told me who the man was.
That's why there's a gap between Nali and Tumua, was because they had separated at that time.
And so we have this running joke that's Tumua's dad. It's not her dad. So my mom ended up dating this police officer, and apparently we spent a lot of time with him, and he wanted to marry my mom. I can't remember my mom's aunt. She sat my mom down and told her, you should not marry this man.
That's your children's father, and you don't want another man raising your daughters because, you never know how they're going to be with your daughters.
Then they got back together, and then, so my mom has a funny story where they're in the car, Papa, Mommy, and Nally.
And I might have said his name in front of my dad, and my dad was like, who?
Papa just lost it. Like, oh, you were taking, my daughters around, hello, he was with another woman that he had a child with anyways. But I have memories of them fighting, and
my mom was very physical with my dad. He never, ever, I've never seen him ever touch her.
And she tells the story because I don't remember it, but she said that she was just picking stuff up and throwing at him, and I would run and get whatever she threw at him and take it away because I didn't want her to keep throwing stuff at him.
I gotta say, my mom too, she kind of eggs on some of the arguments that go, but my dad just, no matter how hard my mom is coming at him, he just let it slide off his back. He doesn't really pay attention. So
she did all the yelling and the swinging, but we would just laugh because my dad would just easily grab her hands and try and keep her away from him. But
So it wasn't until we were more grown that we understood why, because now we're understanding what my mom is saying to him.
When we were younger, speaking for myself, didn't really know what was going on until I got to that age where I think, wait, why is he seeing other ladies and stuff like that?
First time I heard the word affair was out of Neva's mouth, and I was young, maybe in elementary. They were arguing over Neva going to prom with a boy. She's like, why can't I go on a date? You're out here, you're over here having affairs. I'm like, I think I remember me and Junior were like, affair? What's an affair? Because we knew it was something bad because his face just changed. It was like,
I don't know if I ever hated him or resented him for that, because as a child, infidelity, you don't understand what that means. I just knew that my mom was always yelling at Papa and hitting him. And so then I always took it as he was the victim because I didn't understand where my mom was coming from.
I felt more sympathy for my mom because of the heartbreak that we see her go through.
But then when my mom would confront him about it, it was just a denial, 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 denial. But then he would go up to whoever told my mom and threaten them, So it's like,
me and Landa, we actually caught him. So one time I caught him. He was with somebody. We ended up breaking the lady's window. Yolanda threw a softball and hit her in the face or whatever.
but my thing is, like, if he's always having an affair, why wouldn't you just leave instead of putting us all through the same crap over and over?
As much as my dad was out there doing his thing, every time my mom would threaten to leave, he would always say, okay, he was always going to kill himself.
I remember one time I came in the house and my dad was holding a gun. And he was just saying that he was going to kill her and then kill himself. And then my mom's so crazy. Instead of like trying to maybe shield us from that, she was telling me to go because my dad was in his room. He was getting stuff. I don't know if he was getting another gun but she was telling me to go to him and tell him to stop or give you the gun or whatever. I'm like, what the heck? I think it was lined up. Me and her just begging him to stop. It was over an affair again that she had found out.
Like, he needed help. What I mean by that, like, he needed therapy.
It might have been something psychological, kind of.
Because as I've gotten older, like, I understand that is a sickness that he had.
But other than that, if they weren't fighting like that, they seemed to always want to be around each other.
They had good times growing up. We always had what we needed.
That's why I believe that you can, which is really sad, that you can hurt somebody terribly even though you love them. Papa was not afraid to show emotions because he was loving to my mom. He would want to hold her hand or, sit next to her and stuff like that. So we did see a loving side as far as a husband to a wife, because he wasn't, just a Samoan culture, you don't do that. You don't walk down the street and hold your wife's hand, but he would hold my mom's hand.
My mom is such a fob. She does not like outwardly displays of affection. My mom was so crazy. She would make the biggest scene at church anywhere we're at. He puts his arm around her like this, and she's like saying in someone, move your arm, don't touch me.
For a person that has that reputation of being a tough guy, he really did have patience with my mom.
I could see that he did love her. The look on his face when he would come home, with something to share with her. It's like, he would come home like with a, like just, oh, cool. Like just wants to share stuff with her.
Yeah, he was a terrible husband, but not even in all aspects, but he was just a terrible husband because he could not be faithful to my mom.
Even though he had his faults as a husband, But as far as being a father, he was a great father to us.
We never questioned whether he loved us because we knew. And he would tell us, again, speaking the third person, Allah fakele papa ya okom. You know, Papa loves you very much.
He was the best dad. He was always supportive.
So I remember one time in high school, I had, kike pasi, right? And then I came home and I was shocked that he was home. And he said, Sally, where were you? And I told him, he didn't get mad. He didn't raise his voice. He just sat me down, just told me like I shouldn't be doing that and things that I should be careful of.
For the girls, he never really laid hands on the girls. But for me though, oh my gosh, I was getting whooped on a daily. Up to the point to where I thought to myself, like, dude, does he not love me or whatever? Now that I've grown up, I know what he was trying to do. He wasn't trying to make me, just go out there, run wild, because who knows where I would be in life if it wasn't for all those lectures or whatever. I would have done it different from him, but like I said, that was back then where it was how he was raised.
Like I just talked with my friend this past week and she had brought him up and she said, I always like coming to your house because your parents were so nice, especially your dad.
So we would always go play at the neighbor's house, run around. But when the crickets start chirping, that's pretty much it's time to go home. And
whoever's house we happened to be at that time, we would always say, Loa Salko, come on, your dad's here. We'd all be like, oh, because now we know it's time to go kaele.
So he would come get us and he'd carry like two of us, one on each arm, like a gorilla, and then one would be on his neck.
He always did everything for us.
When we had to catch a bus to go seminary sometimes, my dad always taught us to write down the license plate numbers. If we stopped the bus and it didn't stop for us, we'd come home, give the license number to my dad, and my dad would go looking for that bus that day and beat up the bus driver.
Oka, ore lo fai lang whāngau. Ore kausi le lang whāngau. E no re rea lang whāngau. E le sisi e whalabilabit whāngau oloi.
We walked around like we owned the village because nobody messed with us.
My dad is really big on protecting his kids. There was an incident where when we were in elementary, one of the teachers had grabbed me by the shirt. I just walked home from the school to our house and my dad found me on the road and he was like, he could tell that I was crying. So he's like, what happened? So we go to the school. He's calling out the teacher, whatever.
While we were in school, the teachers could hit you back then. We had like a younger, back then a younger teacher. So I was talking in class with one of my cousins. He's like, you two get in the middle. And in the middle was a desk. He told my cousin, get on the table. And so she stood up on the table and then he had a 2x4 and then he whacked her with it on her butt. And then he goes, your turn. And I was like, no. And, he looked like, did she just say no? And I was like, if you touch me, I am going to tell my dad. My dad said, don't let anybody hit us.
So Samoan kids, you know how you just, if the teacher calls and says you did something bad, automatically you would get beat. Or automatically your parents are going to take what the adult says over you. Well, you don't have a say. From a young age, we knew that we were different in that way because no one could tell us anything. Or if they said something to mommy or papa, immediately my parents would be on our side. Like, no, Sally's not like that.
I come home and I tell him a whole different story from 10 other people. He always takes my side.
That's how we were brought up, to fear nothing. Basically, I think that reflected on his children.
Like if anybody's mean to us, we can just tell them to shut up.
Mario ka manguuri a whamai kia o mai korfio o ma kor whanga o roi ai whiwhige e ka whanga e roi ma kor whanga.
When people would find out that some guy was dating me, they'd be like, so Lloyd didn't shoot you, stuff like they joke around like that. But
one time we noticed this cute guy, one of the guys that we thought was cute, like was behind us or ahead, the car was ahead of us. So he intentionally passed him up and then just drove like right alongside them for a while me and Nally were dying. Like, stop, Papa, stop. Oh my gosh. And he's like, oh, he's ugly.
we wouldn't want to walk to the store, so we chased Junior to go on his bike to get our shopping. And during those times of the month, we'd be like, Junior, can you go to the store and get us our pants? He's like, yeah, sure. He'd jump on the bike. He didn't care because we'd always give him $1 as a tip. So one day, Junior was coming home with our shopping, and my dad, from far away in the police car, he could see what was in the bag. And he came home and was like yelling at us, don't ever do that to your brother. All the guys in the village are looking at your brother coming home with pants in his bag.
Because Ben was a California Highway Patrolman, so he and Bob would compare notes about the equipment, the uniforms, and Ben took him to the uniform shop, and he just outfitted himself with the handcuffs, belt keepers, and then he went home and retired. He just bought all that stuff and just retired. So after law enforcement, he worked for the Parks and Rec department. And then he had the opportunity to umpire all the high school games, which he loved. So I think that was a highlight of his time at the Parks and Rec.
One thing about him is he was an eater. He has to have a banana or a taro or breadfruit with everything, which that's why he got into his motorcycle accident.
So the funny thing about how Bubba got his motorcycle was Ben had bought it was a police bike that, was no longer in service or whatever. So Ben bought it. And then on one of Bubba's visits, he saw the bike and he wanted it. So then I told Ben, send your bike to my dad. And so that's what we did. So he was cruising around Island with this retired CHP motorcycle, and he went to register it or something, and somebody was giving him a hard time.
There was a whole bunch of people that complained. So that engine size, it's not allowed back home. He went straight to the governor and had the governor sign the permit.
So he was riding his motorcycle,
and he must have been carrying his food on his bike, and then he got into an accident because I don't know how he was carrying his food and riding the motorcycle.
And a truck turned left, like right in front of him, or turned into him and knocked him off his bike. And he was in the hospital for a while, and then he was able to get a settlement out of that because it was a government vehicle that knocked him off his bike. Yeah. And I think that's when he retired from the Parks and Rec.
My kids were too young, so they really didn't get a chance to form a relationship with my dad. But my dad really loved his grandchildren.
It gave him another meaning to life.
We would go fishing together all the time. He had a straw hat that he wore all the time. Then he just wore a tank top. And then he would always wear Aloha print board shorts, I guess that's what they're called. And he would pack all his stuff and pack snacks for me. And then we would go out, and while he was fishing, he wouldn't be too far out, but he'd be in the water fishing, and I'd be playing on the sand. And then he would give me the fish, and I would string them up together. And sometimes he would let me scale them. I think that's my earliest memory. The memory that's most vivid to me is going to the beach with him to fish a lot.
His grandkids were perfect. If my grandkid wants something that you have, you better give it, that kind of thing.
He spoiled them more than us.
He was very caring and very patient. From what I remember, I was kind of a brat, and I kind of if I wanted something a certain way, then he'll make food and he'll be like, oh, do you want some of this? And if I'm like, no, I want McDonald's, then he would be like, okay. And then we just get in the car and get McDonald's, just that type of grandparent, very overindulgent. But I think that's what I needed at the time with my parents not around and stuff. So
Cheyenne and Kalili would be the ones that really have that relationship with them because they pretty much grew up with my parents.
And so Nally was still in the military at that time, and my mom had come up for Kalili's birth, and she convinced Nally to let me take him, because you're in the service, he's in the, her husband's in the service.
Our firstborn, Kalili, he went to Samoa when he was 3 months. My mom took him home because she didn't want me to put him in daycare or anything. They didn't have a car back then. So he went and somehow bought a truck.
And then he also had a white truck. We were always in that truck.
He got like a airbrush license with Kalili on it, put it on the truck like that's Kalili's truck.
He was supportive in everything. So I was in school. I got pregnant again. Then later on, after I had my son, Cadence, so I guess maybe we're just talking about what I wanted to do with my life. I just told him but didn't know anymore. That I'm just a mom now. And he just told me, well, then if that's what that what is what you want to be for the rest of your life, then you have to just be the best mom you can be. Just shows me that whatever I did or whatever I thought about myself, he always thought of me as more.
When him and grandma would argue, like, and she would kick him out, he literally made like a little hut house in like the back of the softball field. And one day he just picked me up and he was like, "Do you want to see where I'm living?" And I was like, "Sure." And so he showed me, and it was just a little like hut made out of like bricks. And you're living like this? And he's like, "Yeah." I was like, "You need to come home. Like, why are you in the woods like this?"
Like I said, you can't make this stuff up. I was already living with Auntie Simala and her family in San Mateo. And I remember, so I was like, in my early 20s, like 19, 20, 21. I remember calling my mom to wish her happy birthday. And she was crying. She was just crying, saying that, Papa did it again, So it was somebody from Nu'uli, somebody who's from a family who grew up with Papa. The family that we grew up with, like we were best friends with, the younger kids. And so then, of course, I was crying. And then we hang up. And then the phone rings again. It's Papa, right? Because now he called and my mom told him, oh, Sally's crying. So, of course, now he's upset because he knows I'm crying. And it's funny now, but it wasn't funny back then. Because he's talking to me like I'm not his daughter and we're like the same age. Where he's saying, nothing happened. We just kissed.
Even as we were growing older, he was still doing stuff. He did leave my mom and started a new family.
They were no longer living together.
So he had gone home to get all his stuff, like his golf clubs, whatever else, But I remember when he got there, he was mad because my mom had already given his stuff away. Because of course she's trying to hurt him, like how he was hurting her. I remember how I said Papa's very stingy. Like she let her brothers come and take his guns. I don't know who she gave his fishing poles to. Like she just was like, yeah, you take whatever you want.
My dad came back from being in Hawaii for a while. We didn't know why he was there, and I said, "Hey, Papa, you're not going anywhere near Mom, okay? You better stay away from her." And he's like, "What? She's my wife." And I was like, no, excuse you. Your wife, you were away for how long with another lady, and you're saying," and he goes, "Just stop by the house. I want to say hi to Mom." I said, "No." He goes over there. Landa and I were there, and we're like, "Mom, divorce him, divorce him. We're grown up now. We have families of our own. We can take care of ourselves." And he's like, No, I wanna work things out.
Yeah, so they got a divorce when we were in our 40s.
We were grown already. We didn't need them to be together. It hurt me. It hurt us. Yeah, our dad leaving our mom. That does hurt. But I don't know. It was bound to happen after all these years.
Surprising, but not, you know what I mean? Because how else could it have ended? It was just a shock. Like, what? Like, you're going to get divorced now after all these years? It was just weird. Like, why now and why that lady?
So I remember one time I called him and I confronted him because Neva had gotten sick. And, I was yelling at him on the phone, like, you're over here living in Hawaii and my sister's sick now. What are you going to do to help her? Whatever. And then I did call him again about that. Like, how could you leave my mom? That I hate you. Like, how could you do that to our mom? And he had said he didn't want to be with our mom anymore, but that didn't mean that he loved us any less. He just wanted to move on because he found somebody that respects him and loves him, I guess, the way he wanted to be loved. But when I look at it, if he saw now who truly loved him, he wouldn't have divorced her.
We were living in Milani at the time, and my brother Junior came to visit, and then we went with my dad to Costco, and there was the this lady sitting like in the front waiting for a ride or something. Our dad did stop and say hi to her, but my brother and I just continued to go inside. And then he came in later and he's like, oh, she used to be one of my students. And we're like, okay, like, whatever. And then, yeah, so that's the lady that he ended up marrying, before he passed. And then one day, because of course I was mad at him. And then one day the daughter calls me and is like, oh, they needed my address because they were going to come drop off his things. Oh, so this is how it's going to be when you guys get mad at him, bring him back over here.
He stayed with us for a bit. It was just like parenting. It was now I was the parent. But he wasn't the same Papa that I knew. Like he was changed, I just remember I was sitting there because he had gone to bed, right? And I was like, what is that? Like could hear something. So I muted the TV and it was Papa's voice. So I walked up to his door and I could tell that he was talking to somebody, and I just opened the door. I said, what are you doing? I said, are you talking? I was pissed. Because, yeah, he was talking to her. Like, she chased you out. Why are you now talking to her? The last time I saw him was in Visalia when that woman kicked him out. That was my last time seeing him at the airport when he was heading back to her.
So diabetes run in our family on my dad's side of the family. But my dad was in denial. Him not being treated for diabetes contributed to his health deteriorating. And, every time he had a sore, and it's common with people that are diabetic, if you have an open sore, like it takes a lot longer to heal.
I think he hurt his toe, something like a small cut or whatever, but his diabetes was bad and it just never really healed. And then he would go to, because this is in Samoa, they would scrape it out when he would tell us what they were doing. I'm like, they just scrape? I don't know. He's like, yeah, they scrape the infection out. I don't even know if that's a thing. So they kept doing that in Samoa, but it would never heal. So then he finally came off island, and they told him that whatever they were doing in Samoa they weren't supposed to be doing that. It just made the infection worse.
Because they ended up amputating his leg below the knee. He was one of the few older men, like, in the ward who was healthy. Like, he could still run. He was always in shape. Papa was always fit because he's always moving.
I think it was hard, man. He always had this tough exterior. For people to see him coming, with the cane or missing a leg, and him not being able to move on his own, do what he wants. I think it took a toll on him.
He didn't seem very happy anymore, because he couldn't do the things he used to do before.
But he was also depressed. I can say that.
And he was just miserable. You could just see it.
The last time I was with him was in Hawaii. None of us were really talking to him, but I remember Arna's told me to just reach out to my dad. And I was, no, I don't want to, But Arna's a different kind of person. He's always forgiving. I'm grateful that to this day that he did that, because he did tell me, like, if something happens to your dad, you're going to feel really bad. So we go over there. I finally got in touch with him and he told us where he lived. And then we went over there. I just couldn't believe it. It's my first time seeing him so long, and he's using a walker and he's walking so slow. In my mind, it's like, no, that's an old man. That old man was my dad. It was never an image that I would have of him in my mind, because my image of my dad in my mind is he's the toughest, bravest, the best, the most perfect man I could think of.
He was a skeleton of himself, of the brother that I've known all my life.
Close to him passing, that we didn't know was going to pass, he was always asking for my son, for Khalid, and he didn't get to see him before he passed, but we didn't know he was going to pass because the lady didn't even tell us that he was in the hospital. Like, he didn't want any life-saving procedures or anything like that. But that, I think God whispered to me to go to the hospital, because I had no plans to go see him, and we were planning actually to go to the beach that day. But I don't know, like, getting ready to go to the beach, it was like just something was like, you know, pushing me to go see my dad that day. Let's just go see my dad real quick, then we'll go to the beach. And when we went and opened the door, and he looked so different, like I knew right there that he wasn't gonna last long. It was at the point where no more talking. All he was doing was looking, and he was alone. Like, if he was still married to my mom, if my mom was around, like, that's the thing is, my mom would have never left him at the hospital. No matter how he treated her, like, she would have stayed there with him.
Well, this is just what I hear from my sisters. I guess when my dad was, bedridden or whatever, she wasn't really caring for him the way she should have been.
So she wasn't even there when he passed. But that's okay because, at least we were there. He wasn't alone.
Like, he couldn't really talk. So Junior had his kids, like, they were singing primary songs, and he was trying to sing along with him. And I remember watching that video, because we had already scheduled our vacation to go to Hawaii. And I was watching that video, and Ben said, Sally, you have to go. Like, it was obvious that he wasn't going to last for much longer. So we booked my flight, and I flew out like maybe the following day or 2 days later. And it was just a weird trip. Like, I was traveling by myself, and there was just this crazy white woman, right? Crazy in a good way. And so I noticed her on my flight because she had a Hawaiian dress on with like a fake, flower lei. And then we ended up in the bathroom together, and I just said, oh, I love, you look ready for Hawaii or something like that. And I don't start conversations with people. And then we ended up sitting next to each other on the plane. She was just really goofy, like very talkative. Like, she said, would you pray with me? Because she was nervous. And she held my hand, and we said a prayer. And then we got to Hawaii. Auntie Lulu and Uncle Junior were there to pick me up because she was going to go catch a taxi to her hotel. And I said, no. I said, can we drop her off? Like, it's on the way. And so they were like, okay. Like, I missed saying goodbye to him. And I was like, did he pass away, like, while we were dropping her off? And Lulu said, no, he had already passed at that time. Like, I was thinking, could I have made it? But Lulu, she made a good point. She was like, I think that woman was meant to be there for you. Because we just talked the whole flight, and she was just making me laugh. And yeah, like, we dropped her off at her hotel, and I never saw her again.
She feels that lady was put there for her because she was able to, have conversation through the flight and really take her mind off of what was going on.
He looked so tired, If you're tired, you can go. You don't have to wait. I asked him to forgive me because I was mean to him.
So I was bitter towards him then. I didn't really want to talk to him or nothing like that. But as his health was deteriorating, and I just had to forgive, man. He didn't have much time left. So I just had to find it in myself to forgive him.
I was at my friend's because he was sick. He was in the hospital. And we went to my friend's place for the weekend. And I remember getting the call when we were at her house. It was the worst day of my life. At that time, because the worst day of my life is left to pass, but the worst day of my life was that day.
It was so hard because that's the first time I seen somebody actually take their last breath.
It was good for us to be there. His last day, I got to shave him, give him his last shave, even run the trimmers up his nose hairs, something that I got to do for him before he passed away.
We knew it wasn't going to be the same anymore. And it isn't.
It was really hard for me. Like, he's very emotional like me. So like we were already super, like whenever we would talk on the phone, we'd cry, like start crying for no reason because we just like missed each other. And then yeah, it was super hard. Like we were on the plane, we were hoping that we could get there before he passed away, and we just weren't quick enough because we lived in Virginia.
I grieved for a little bit because I know that he's not going to be here anymore. My kids are not going to have a relationship with him, when they get older.
He's my brother. I'm proud of him and I miss him. Several things that my wife and I talked about it. Our trips to Samoa. I miss seeing him at the airport.
Papa's influenced me to stand up for myself, to raise my children the same way. I mean, I hope I raised them to know, if somebody tells you to do something that you're not comfortable with, then you're done. That's how we were raised.
The way he influenced me, I'm like a helicopter parent because he always watched over us. I mean, he was always there, the dad that's always there.
If we needed him for anything, he would come through.
He taught us not to be scared of anyone. He taught us to speak our minds, which is what we do. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but
One of the things I really admire about my brother is that he was not afraid.
I want them to always know that he loved each and every one of us, and especially his grandchildren. Like, he would have done anything for them.
He's a jack of all trades, can do everything. Like, he's super loving, like he's very family oriented, and he's somebody that you definitely would want to have in your corner.
I would tell them that he was a great dad. He raised us right. He did everything for us. And when I say everything, I mean everything. We didn't have to lift a finger for nothing growing up.
He's very compassionate. He will go out of his way to help somebody.
Just have no fear, and just stand up for yourself.
Okay, your grandkids, like your grandpa, city that offer.
Papa's legacy, his pride in his village, in the gospel, his love for his children and grandchildren, and his respect for his parents.
Ang kaila bay bago fumaroy, ubawangi kalalay mongi. Kaila mangi kalalay mongi wa ave pahingan marmaru fa mawo makuya kya uma.
I just want them to know that their grandfather was always kind and always supportive, never judgmental.
It's somebody that I'm very proud to be called my brother.
I love my older brother. He's the most loving and caring person in our family. And he is a person that I would go to if I needed help. And Lois got that smile on his face that when he smiled, it illuminates everything. I mean, and when you hear him laugh, it changed everything.
I loved my dad. I'm grateful he was my dad.